So things are starting to look pretty good. We can log in, we can log out, we can protect routes, we can update and add and delete movies, and that's all very good, but there is one problem, something you've probably noticed, and let's have a look at it. So I'm on my application. Let me log in. So I'll log in as me@here.com with the password. And that's fine. I'm logged in, I can see my log out, I've got the protected menu items, and there's my state with JWT. And I can browse around and do things, and that's great. But let's go back to the home page. Now I'll copy this URL, okay? So I've copied it. Now I'm going to go somewhere else. So I'll go to www.golang.org, okay? So now I've gone to a different site. Now, if I actually try to go back to where I was a minute ago by pasting that URL in, I'm not logged in anymore. And that's kind of irritating. And these errors over here come from my ad blocker. So we can just ignore those. There's nothing to do with our application. So what we want to do is to be able to save the fact that we're logged in. And you might do that by allowing the user to check a box on the login screen saying, remember me or something like that. But we're just going to assume that users want to stay logged in right now. How are we going to do that? Well, let's go back to our code. And I'm looking right now at the login file. Okay, the login file. And I'm looking at the part where we actually perform the login, the handle submit function. What I'm going to do is at this point, after my fetch in the final then clause in the else, where we're allowed to log in right here, okay? So we're redirecting the user to admin. Just before we do that, I'm going to do something else. And what I'm going to do is take that token that we've received back from the REST API, and I'm going to put it into local storage. Now I could put it into a cookie if I wanted to, but I'm going to put it into local storage just because it's really convenient and every modern browser out there supports it. So after this .handle JWT change and before the redirect, what I'll do is just call window.localstorage.setItem, and I'll call it JWT. That's the key we'll use to get it back. And I need to, of course, stringify JSON. I need to call JSON.stringify on this item before I can store it in local storage. So JSON.stringify, and I'm going to stringify object.values data, the first index of that array. And at that point, I've put it into local storage. So let's see if that works. Just to go back to our web browser, and I'll click on login, and I'll clear the console, and I'll enter me@here.com password. And then over here, in my JavaScript developer tools, I'll choose storage, and I'll look at local storage and click on localhost 3000, and there it is. I've saved that item in my local storage. Well, that's great. I've got it in there, but of course I need to get it back out in order for this to be useful at all. So let's go back to our code, and this time we'll go to app.js. And there's a couple of things I'm going to do here. Right at the top, to start with, on logout, rather than just saying this.set or this.setState and setting JWT to nothing, we also want to clear local storage at this point. If they log out, if they're making the conscious decision to log out, we want to get rid of that item. So we'll just call window.localstorage.removeItem and remove it by key, and I called it JWT. So that should get rid of the item once the user chooses to log out. Now, more importantly, I'm going to add another function here, and I'll add a component didMount function. And at this point, when we're loading this component, I'm going to check to see if there's an entry JWT in local storage. So I'll say let t for token equal window.localstorage.getItem JWT. And if that doesn't exist, t will have the value of null. So I can just check if t. So if it's not null, it exists. Then I'll check to see if the user is already logged in. If this.state.jwt is exactly equal to an empty string, then I'll try to log the user in again. Okay? So that would be as simple as this.setState, and I want to set JWT, and since I've just pulled this item out of local storage, I have to parse it. JSON.parse T. Okay, now that's very simple. Let's see if it works. So I'll go back to my web browser, and I'll clear this item out of local storage. So delete all. And I'll reparse this, or reload this, and go to the console and see if we got it right. So let me clear this whole thing. And let's log in. me@here.com, password. Okay, so we're logged in. That's great. Now let me copy this URL and go somewhere else. www.reactjs.org. I think that's a URL. Yes, it is. And now I'll paste my address back into the location bar. And we're logged in. And let's make sure everything still works. And it does. Now let's log out. And let's check local storage. And there's nothing in there. So perfect. So now we have a means of persisting our login. Now obviously this will only last for the lifetime of the token, which in our case is 24 hours. And there are lots of ways to handle the situation where you try to use a token and redirect the user to the login screen, but none of that is terribly difficult, and I think you should be able to figure that out on your own. All right, that's enough for this time around. Let's move on.